And welcome back, guys, to another video. First of all, Merry Christmas to all of you who are celebrating today. In Austria, I celebrated yesterday, in fact, but I'm sure that many of you who are watching are celebrating on the 25th, perhaps. I wanted to make a follow-up video on the Vienna GM Tournament, which was also my last video on this channel. Previously, I recorded a video after halftime in the event. If you missed that video, make sure to check it out. I'll put an info card here. Now, just a quick summary in case you haven't seen it. I organized a tournament for the first time in Vienna together with the Austrian Chess Federation, and it was a closed GM round-robin tournament organized for our Austrian up-and-coming talented generation who got some pretty strong opposition there and had chances to make a norm. And in fact, I will already tell you now, the tournament was a big success if we look at that, because we had two norms with from Austrian players, one Grandmaster norm achieved by Dotzer and one international master norm achieved by my student Peter Balint, which of course I'm especially happy about. But generally, those, I mean, to have two norms in a closed round robin tournament is already quite a nice achievement, and especially if the host country is achieving that for the local players. So overall, I'm really happy with how it went, and that's a good way to end the year. Actually, both of the players who achieved the norm, it's not the last tournament of the year. They're both competing in a tournament, I think, starting today or starting tomorrow. So yeah, definitely good luck to them. Hopefully they can continue their streak. It was, by the way, Lukas Dotzer's second Grandmaster norm, so now he even has a chance to score his final one. I think he's playing in the Wilton Cup. And Peter Balint, it was his first international master norm. Okay, so I prepared a couple of games which I wanted to show you. The first one was, in fact, from Peter Balint, who won a nice game in the 5th round against Fromm. And I wanted to show you that game out of, I mean, a couple of reasons, but the main one was the opening stage. Peter Balint had the white pieces, and he played my recommendation in the Reti course with Rookie 1, which I've analyzed with him together on numerous occasions, and it worked out pretty well for him in that game. And what I thought was even funnier was that as I recently released my King's Indian course for Black, I also needed to recommend something against my Rookie 1 system. And in fact, Fromm played exactly what is my recommendation in my King's Indian course, which is the setup with knight e7, then to go e5, rook e8, and basically whenever white goes a4, black goes a5, and then I wanted to fianchetto my bishop to the queen side, exactly how Fromm here played with b6 followed by bishop b7. I thought this was the most practical approach if you handle the position with black. Because whenever the bishop appears on b7, like in the game, there will always be some pressure on the e4 pawn. And then at some moment, white probably needs to push d5. Otherwise, black could even have some ideas to take and then put pressure on e4 by going knight e5 next. So this is also what happened in the game. And black, in fact, did manage to equalize here. But I'm not sure he chose the right plan, meaning Fromm here. Queen e7 was a fine move, but I think that rook f8 would have been probably more in the spirit to move the queen and then perhaps move the king first and then the knight, and then to just immediately push for f5. He also came up with quite an original idea to regroup, which is to put the queen to f8, which sometimes you can also see in the King's Indian, often actually with the idea of going king h8, knight g8, and then bishop h6 to exchange his often passive bishop on g7. Here it does have one downside though, which is that the pawn on c7 can be targeted, which Peter Balint also did by playing knight b5. Now we're going to skip a couple of more moves ahead. I thought it was quite interesting at actually only 2 moves ahead. I thought it was interesting he started pushing the h4, the h pawn here. And now he sacrificed the e4 pawn. I'm not sure, I haven't spoken to him about that yet, but I'm not sure if it was planned. I mean, it had to be, unless he blundered h6 here. it works out well, especially in the game. It worked out well to sacrifice the pawn like this, but I thought it was quite an interesting decision just to leave the e4 pawn. But obviously black will have some difficulties protecting the knight on d7 as well, and the light squares are going to become weak too. So Fromm went back with the knight, Peter took on g6, now knight to g4, black took on b5, exchange on f6, and now we got this position. And white obviously is a pawn down here, but has the very, very powerful bishop on e6. Generally also the bishop pair, which could also play a role, but now Peter played a very nice move. I think it's nice to approach this position, like if you want to solve it, for example, or also in a game. I'm sure that Peter thought about it the same way. Which pieces can he still improve here? Obviously, the king would probably prefer to be on g2 at some moment, probably to maybe then facilitate rook h1. But one piece in specifically is just not doing anything whatsoever, which is the rook on a1. And that's why he came up with this move rook a4, which I thought was pretty nice, just to get the rook active. It could go to c4 to harass c7, or could also swing all the way over to h4 to put some pressure on black's king. Yeah, the rest of the game, I think that both of the players were in time trouble throughout most of the game, but in the end Peter was able to win. There were some mutual mistakes, but I'd rather go to another game. These were the most memorable moments from that game for me. All right, next game is between Lukas Dotzer and Robert Ernst, which there were some interesting moments there. It came from an anti-martial with a4, bishop b7, d3, a line which I've also played myself with white, most recently against UNG in the World Cup. Actually, just he went b4 against me, and it was this. Actually, let's go through here. So bishop b7, d3, d6, knight d2, now knight d7, and now c3. I've played in the past this line with knight f1 too against Rasmus Swane. I made a separate video about that on my channel. I think it's called like my best opening novelty ever or something along those lines. It was like this how my game went. Take on b7, queen takes b7, and now I think it was knight e3, knight e6, knight f5, bishop f6, and now h4, which I played. This was actually my preparation back then. I looked at this with Grandmaster Hare Krishna, and I played this against Rasmus Swane in the 2022 European individuals. I think got a very nice position out of the opening, then was completely winning, and then managed to lose it in an unbelievable fashion. Anyway, Lukas went for c3, which is the main move. Knight c5, take, and generally there are a lot of exchanges in this line, but white tends to keep some pressure just because of the slide space advantage, what black is typically also. Okay, and here Lukas went for h4, which is quite a rare move, but I've seen this at some point before too. He was saying after the game that he wasn't sure if this was at the right moment, but I think it actually is. I believe that MVL has also played like this in some games. And in some lines, it's mostly not about knight g5 as I understand, but whenever black goes bishop f6 later, there can be some ideas with g4, g5. And also generally white, of course, as it often is nowadays, just wants to gain space by going h5, and if black allows to do so, then is also happy to go h6 in some of the lines. Yeah, now we're gonna skip a couple of more moves ahead. Black went queen a1, which is a typical idea, sort of forcing d5. And okay, we are going to go to this moment here. So the rooks exchanged, and I saw the position like when I was watching live a couple of moves earlier, and then at some point I joined back in, and the bishop on a8 was traded, which was quite surprising to me. And this is where it happened, where Robert Ernst took on b3 with a knight, giving away the bishop on a8, which is not a bad decision just yet. It was just a bit surprising to me, and I think also to Lukas. Bishop b7 seemed a bit more natural, just to keep the bishop. It seems like the light squared bishop is quite an important piece, but I think that Robert Ernst was might have been a bit worried about the bishop also being maybe possible to target on b7 with knight a5 or so, but I'm not sure. Yeah, bishop a6 now is not possible because of knight c6. But like this, also if white takes on b7, then at least white's queen is not going to be activated like this. Now the queen is quite nasty on the 8th rank. Robert went knight f8. This is a mistake, however. Instead, bishop f8 should have been played, so to get the knight to f6. But still, I guess that now white even black needs to be ready to sacrifice the c7 pawn, like this. Now knight bc5 is good. Queen takes c7 and queen c3 or queen takes c4. Yeah. In the game, knight f8 was the move which was played, which worked out fine for him in the end. But now it did give white a chance with queen c6 to immediately go after the c7 pawn, and here it would have been probably quite tricky for black already to hold this. Queen e8 was what Lucas played with, I think, the concrete idea that after bishop f6 he wants to go g4, which then he also did. But this has a tactical flaw. It does look like a natural idea, just aiming to go g5 next to trap the bishop on f6, but it's surprising that black actually has quite a few moves here not to be worse, and even one way to be better. In the game, while I was there at that point, I thought that queen b5 was a very safe alternative, especially looking at Lucas's tournament situation back then. It was round number 6. He had a fantastic score of 4.5 out of 5. So I thought he would be solid here, but he was apparently in a very big fighting mood with g4, trying to go for the full point. With queen b5, white probably keeps a slight pressure. The players were analyzing this after the game, that black would probably, well, first of all, black needs to trade and then probably go knight d4. Also, other moves like knight c5 and knight a5 are probably possible, but this does seem like the most logical way here. And, well, first of all, in a position like this, white can probably never be worse. I mean, you can try to regroup the knight to d3. It is certainly a draw because black has some options to go for an opposite color bishop endgame, but white can try to play for 2 results, even though, as I said, it should be sort of a basic draw. Instead, knight takes d4 might be a bit more interesting. E takes d4, bishop d2. Now, white actually has a threat of going bishop a5 next, so black cannot take on h4 because this would win for white now with a nice break through e5. And if black takes, then d6. Black can basically resign. Actually, now I see that knight e6 is coming. Maybe this is not so clear. D takes c7, bishop takes c7, take, b6, knight a6. This is not so clear. I remember this should have been winning. Bishop f5. If that's true, that would be pretty nice. Pretty nice prophylaxis. Let me promote this variation. So just preparing d6 on the next move, and, well, if g6, for example, bishop c8. And now I think that d6 is coming. So if that's true, I think that would be a pretty nice variation. So not d6, that was just some automatic analysis, I assume, but looks like bishop f5 needs to be played, but there white is winning. But of course, black can go knight d7 with the idea to answer bishop a5 with knight b6. I analyzed this a bit. Computer did give some advantage, but I also didn't really see a great way for white to improve after some point. Black also does have some activity. Yeah, this was one line I've analyzed. Knight d7 comes, and whenever white's bishop on a3 moves, then knight c5 will come. Maybe you can play h5 and then g4, g5 at some point, but then also after taking the e5 square will be vacated. So maybe white can try this to try and get the bishop to g4, because if white can exchange the bishop against black's knight on d7, then I guess it's just lost because white can pick up the pawn on d4. There are still some questions to be answered for black. I mean, what's also possible is that some endgame like this could be a draw, but it can be quite close, I guess. So this would have been a safe alternative, but Lucas went for g4. And now if it's white's move again, then g5 will just be coming and the bishop is going to be trapped. At first, when I saw it, I thought that g6 could be a move. I thought so, but Maybe it was not here, because then white can just go for this with knight g5. I thought there is one way to try and save the bishop, which anyway is probably not the right plan. So g6 is, I think, just losing. And then also while I was watching, I was starting to calculate the move which Robert Ernst played in the game, queen takes c4. Because now after g4, white's king is weak. So black really needs to play concretely here. I don't think there's any way to save the bishop. So Lucas took on b3. This was obviously the plan. Otherwise c2 is hanging. And now went for g5. And now again, black needs to follow it up concretely. Otherwise the bishop on f6 is just gone. But queen b1 check, king g2, and queen takes e4. And now the issue is if white takes on f6, then queen g4 check picks up the knight on f3, and black is going to be winning. King is going to be safe. Also d5 will be weak. So Lucas tried king g3, and here Robert played h5, which I overheard after the game that he actually calculated all the way from here after g4, and after h5 he realized that he cannot be worse, which is the case. If white takes here, then queen g4 check again picks up the knight on f3. And if g takes h6, then the threat is basically gone, because black's bishop is not attacked anymore, and here black is winning. So Lucas tried knight h2, now queen g6, king h3, queen f5 check, king g3, and now a very nice transition of the advantage, queen d7, exchanging the queens. And now actually white is going to lose all of the pawns, because d5 will also fall. Black is going to have 4 pawns for the piece, which should be winning. Lucas here blundered immediately with bishop d2, after which knight e4 he resigned. Was probably in severe time trouble here, but also the position should be lost long term. Like black is probably going to play f6, put the king to e6, and then just start pushing the pawns. I liked Robert Ernst's calculation here after g4. I thought that was pretty well done. And why I also showed that game was also to show the fact that Lucas took a pretty big psychological blow, I would say, with this game, but managed to come back nicely after that, and then secured the GM norm. Because like if you're in such a great position with 4.5 out of 5, then lose a game with white against a low-rated opponent than yourself, then it might be kind of a demotivating thing. But I mean, after the game, he was there analyzing with his opponent, which I don't think that many people would do after such a game, and then managed to fight back, which is quite an important feat to have, I believe, if you want to be successful as a good player. All right, so let's have a look at the next game. This was between Grzegorz Pechac and Valentin Baidetskiy from round number 8. And I wanted to jump to the end game here. Grzegorz had some slight pressure throughout the middle game. It started with the Scotch game, had the bishop pair, but now Valentin Baidetskiy had a decision to make. And I'm curious, how would you guys capture here on d3? Because both moves are a draw, I can already tell you that. But I think it's a nice sort of stylistic choice. Like, how would you take on d3? Would you go for the opposite color bishop endgame, being a pawn down? Or would you go what Valentin Baidetskiy also did, to take on d3 and then trying to construct a fortress by playing b5 and f5, when white's king cannot really enter, at least for the time being? I would definitely also consider that one. After seeing the game, I realized that it's maybe not like as bulletproof as you might think it is, because there is a way for white to break through this fortress. Objectively speaking, not, but practically speaking, Grzegorz Pechac did a very nice job here. After knight takes d3, it's probably more bulletproof, I would say, actually, to make a draw here with black. Black is just going to bring the king, and yeah, just sit and wait probably in a position like this. I don't know, if bishop b4, maybe you can just go h5, then g6, and this should be a pretty basic draw. But also when I saw this in the game, I thought players are just gonna shake hands here. So there's absolutely no blame for Valentin Baidetskiy. I think that was a very logical choice. But I still wanted to show you how the game then went, because Pechac was able to win this position from the white side. So g4 was played. If black manages to get f5, b5, h5, g6, then probably there's no way to break through for white. So he tries to make things harder for black by going g4. Baidetskiy went g6, which is fine. Also, king g6 could have been played with the idea to then go for f5 and then maybe h5, for example, like this. It's just important not to let the king in, yeah? So that's why you need to go b5 and also here f5, otherwise the king would enter by going king e4. And this position should also be a draw. Black can go h5 next, for example. But Baidetskiy went for g6, now g5. Otherwise, again, f5 would come. And like if this is going to come in a game, I guess there is really no way to break through. I don't even know if I'm gonna go h5 here. I mean, again, the king does have some entry squares there. Not sure if I really want to go for this. Maybe I can now just sit and wait for the rest of the game. And whenever white goes h4, then I will go h5, just so that the h4 square is covered. Because if I go h5 here, then, I don't know, maybe white will start already. But if black is not careful, then the king could maybe enter through g5 like it happened in the game. But here I think that black can just sit and wait. So Gergos tried the move g5 here. Black needs to take. Now d4. Anyway, black cannot protect the g5 pawn. For example, if he goes f6, then the king will enter. So Baidetskiy went b5, king d3, f5. Again, trying to restrict white's king and not let him enter. Bishop takes g5, and now again, it looks like there's no way for white to make any progress whatsoever, but Gergos found a way. He brought the king. Brought the king to g3. All of this was still okay for black. Maybe already here, knight b4 would have been a way to start some more active defense, but this was still all right. He waited with the king g7, bishop to f2, but now it started to get a little bit trickier. King f6 and now bishop a5, and then intending to go bishop d8 check and then to get into g5 with the king. That's why I was saying that maybe it would have been time to start some action before with knight b4. I mean, not action, but at least to get some chances of counterplay here. Like if king g3, knight d3, and then king e6, black will have some active counterplay by himself. And for example, this is one important idea here, to go knight e1 in the end. But in the game, so this was what happened there. And now g5, which is already sort of a concession which lets in white's king. It is still a draw here, but now black really needs to be careful. Instead, knight f4 or also knight e3 would have been possible. This is probably, I don't know, this is maybe the safest. If king g5 now, there's going to be knight e6. And apart from that, I don't know if black's king can enter. Like, what happens if I go for a move like b3? Maybe also can go after the pawns now, because d5, knight d4 is there, attacking both white pawns. Baidetskiy played g5, but now the king is entering. This was still a draw, but it's not really what you want from the starting position. Like, you had such a nice fortress. Bishop d8 check, king to e6, take, king g5, g4 pawn is hanging as well. Knight d3, b3, and now it's Baidetskiy made the final mistake by going b4 here. His idea was to go knight c1 next, and then to pick up the pawn on b3. But after bishop a5, then he did not go for the plan with knight c1, because after bishop takes b4, knight takes b3, maybe he realized that white can just go bishop c3 here. And the bigger problem is also that white has the right bishop, so if black sacrifices the piece, then white will be winning, because the bishop is correct in this endgame. So this was the final mistake. Instead, it was already quite difficult for black. Knight c1, and if b4, now g3. Take on g3, knight d2. Apparently this is a draw, but I mean, this is so difficult to evaluate in a game. Like, if I would see this, I would definitely not be sure that this is a draw. And also black probably needs to be still quite precise here. Always looking for counterplay with the knight. So b4 was played in the game. Now bishop a5, king to d5, take, king takes d4, and king f5, a nice way to cut off the king immediately. Also h4 right away would have been winning, but this was a nice move. Knight to c1, h4, knight takes b3, bishop takes b4, and even though white is only one pawn up, there is no way for black to reach the h pawn. It's just going to run towards a queen, and therefore Valentin Baidetskiy resigned here. So quite painful loss for him, especially also looking at his tournament trajectory. He did remain GM norm chances until the 7th round, I think. Until this, yeah, in the 7th round, then I believe he lost the game against Marius Fromm. Then in the 8th round, he lost this game against Pechac, and that's why he was not able to make a GM norm in this tournament. All right, so I think we have one last remaining game, which is from the last round and which was also the decider how Lukas Dotzer managed to make his second Grandmaster norm. He had the black pieces against Marius Fromm, and it started with Moscow, bishop e5 check, knight d7, short castle a6, bishop e2, knight f6, d3, which is quite a modern line. I think I've covered it on my YouTube channel at some point as well, and also there recommended a setup for black. Generally, white's idea is here to go for a4 next, and then depending how black develops, well, after e6, it's the idea to go for a4. But if black goes for g6, I think then white is going for some can go for some Morozzi position with knight c3, d4, or also has ideas to go knight c3, then a3, rook b1, and b4. These are the ideas here. e6 is the main move, which was also played by Dotzer. Now a4, stopping b5, b6, and now knight fd2. Funny thing about this idea is for the first time I saw it like 2 years ago or so. I don't think there were any games at this point. Maybe there were a couple of them, but it was still quite a rare idea. And the whole setup seemed interesting for white, because if black makes the most logical moves, which also basically happen in the game, then white has possibilities to create a pretty strong initiative on the king side by going f4, g4. And this is exactly what happened in the game here. Bishop b7, the most logical moves. Queen to c7, covering the b7 bishop. Knight c3, and now short castle. And now after g4, it starts to become pretty unpleasant, because white just has a very nice attack on the king side, and black is struggling to create something. I mean, bishop c3, bishop c6, b5 can be played later on, but even after that, white's attack is probably going to be faster than black's. That's also why short castle here is probably not the best. Black should go d5 immediately, because if g4 comes in this position and black does not need to castle short immediately, and maybe just can go h6, maybe even think about some g5 ideas or something, maybe queenside castle could be an idea too. So it would have been better to keep the king in the center for the moment. Actually, my idea to combat this system, which I think is still a very rare move here. After knight fd2, meanwhile, there are like 70 games. But I think that knight e5 is quite a smart move from the black side. I don't think it was even the best move according to the computer at first. But it really, it doesn't allow white his whole setup, because if he goes for f4 now, knight c6, so that's the whole idea. It looks ridiculous, but the knight is just misplaced on d7 and would much rather be on c6. And if bishop f3, now bishop b7, and now white's issue is, with the knight already being on c6, if he goes for his plan with knight c3, then I can immediately go knight d4, eliminate the bishop on f3, and after that, black will not have any problems with the bishop pair. So the computer, I think, wants to play now with c3 and then some strange knight a3, knight c2 or so. But I didn't really think that this was now such a big problem for black. I mean, even at some point you can go d5, and then maybe after e5 it's going to be some strange French type of position. But I think this is the best for black. So if you're playing the Najdorf and play knight d7 against the Moscow, I think this is a good place to take notes. All right, so the game was incredibly complicated. After this g4, g5, Lukas was under a lot of pressure for a long time in a pretty bad position. But things got incredibly complicated at this point. White is winning here, but there's so much tension in the center that it must have been quite difficult also for white to make the right decision here. In the game, Fromm went for f takes e6, which is still a good move. But after knight takes d3, using the pin on this diagonal, now here is where he went wrong, by taking on d5, which allowed Dotzer to take on c1, and still black's king does look fairly weak, but there's actually no way to make use of that now. especially because the knight on f4 is pretty cannot go anywhere because the queen of g3 will be hanging too. There were a couple of interesting options here for white. The computer said that knight takes h5, g takes h5, and now g6 is the best, which I don't know if if that is the most human way. If f takes g6, then d4, and if the knight moves, then white can take on g6. So this is one way. Another way which I found quite interesting. It was not any of the computer choices, but d4 I thought was also interesting. And if knight d3, which I guess was a problem, if you consider that move, then just e5 to sacrifice the exchange, and black cannot really take on f5. If he takes with the pawn, then g6 is going to be bad news for the king. And if e takes f5, then white can take on d5, I guess, or maybe an f5. I didn't check that here. It's also actually very logical. What happens if I take here? Maybe this is not so clear after black takes. Some bishop b6 maybe going after the d4 pawn, and here black's king is fairly safe. So I didn't check this earlier. Maybe white can go all out like this and take on h5 or go g6. But yeah, this also doesn't, now that I have a look at it, it also doesn't seem like such a clear way. So f takes e6, knight takes d3, and I mean now instead of e takes d5, I guess e takes f7 is a more natural way to continue. But after rook takes f7, now you need to see the follow-up, because otherwise there's a lot of pressure on f4. I mean the knight is hanging, and also the rook on c1 is hanging. So here white has only one move to get a winning advantage, and even not to be worse, which is a move knight to f5. And now we are attacking the knight on d3, are also threatening moves like knight h6, for example. So if black takes on c1 now, I guess knight h6 followed by knight f7 is basically lights out. Also take notes here that knight e2 does not in fact win the queen, because after knight takes e2 the queen is protected by the knight. Just to point that out. Yeah, if g takes f5, then g6, you could also take on d3 immediately with the queen, but this was generally the idea. Also, again, here with the whole point that now queen takes b5 basically traps the knight on a4. Also, there's a double attack on the rook on e8 too. So this was white's win here. But fortunately for Lucas, e takes d5 was played, and now knight takes c1, bishop takes c1, and here, even though white's position still looks fairly active, with all of the pieces basically being active, white's attack is starting to slow down quite a bit, and black himself now gets a lot of counterplay with the bishop coming to b6. And still knight takes g6 is not possible because the queen on g3 is hanging. Knight c3 was played, which was objectively a mistake, but I mean the players were on seconds here. Bishop b6 immediately was better. After knight c3, there was apparently a chance with queen to e1 to still keep the game going, and it's just completely unclear. Instead, knight f5 was played with the idea to give away this knight and then take on c3. But now black's position is really winning. Bishop c7, and here f4 is also hanging. If the knight moves, rook f1 will come. And after bishop b2, there was bishop e5, just protecting against the checkmate threats. Queen c2, bishop takes f4, and Marius Fromm resigned, which meant the second Grandmaster norm for Lukas Dotzer. So that was it for the Vienna GM Tournament 2025. Again, I'm pretty happy with the tournament overall, especially considering the fact that it was my first time organizing a tournament, and basically the main objective, which is to get some norms, was achieved, and lots of strong opposition for our players. For two of them, Ernst Buhmann and, well, in specific Ernst Buhmann, it did unfortunately not go so well. But another good thing of those tournaments is even if it goes badly, you have strong opposition, and there's a lot to learn there. Yeah, so I'm sure Lawrence hopefully can take away some instructive moments from the tournament and some experience. Robert Ernst, who we've seen the game earlier from, played a pretty solid tournament. I think he made 5 draws and won against Lukas Dotzer. And of course, Dotzer and Balint managed to achieve the norms in the tournament. So again, big congratulations to them. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's already quite long here, 34 minutes. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and maybe a comment. Would very much appreciate that. Really helps out the channel. Hope you guys have a very nice Christmas time. Again, for those of you who are celebrating today, make sure to have a nice time with your family, and I will see you guys in the following days, hopefully with new content to come. See you guys soon.